This is Michael Govier from the Is It Safe podcast, and you are now clear for communication with Pop Goes Your World.
If you haven't already, subscribe on iTunes. And while you're there, please leave us a rating and review.
And now it's time for our featured presentation.
I'm Chris McBrien, and the pop culture from Generation X is everything to me.
And I'm Derek Myers, and I'm here to educate Chris on the great pop culture of today's generation.
Episode 198, Heavy Metal Albums of the 1980s. Hey, I'm Chris McBride, along with Derek Myers. This is Pop Goes Your World, the pop culture podcast for the generations. Now, this week, we're going to be going back in time to the decade we all know and love, the 80s, and we're going to talk about our favorite heavy metal albums from that decade. And to help us relive this amazing metal music, Derek has invited a guest to join us, the one and only radio veteran, Greg Martin, a Detroit radio market veteran, where he hosted several shows featuring heavy metal and hard rock. And but before we get to any of our recent pop culture, Derek, do you want to just introduce Greg to everybody? And
Absolutely. So, Chris, how you doing this week? You doing well?
I'm good, thanks, buddy.
Awesome. Okay, I'm doing great. Thanks for asking.
Yeah.
All right, so we around here from time to time, we like to have our friends and guests on the show, especially when there's a topic that we feel that they can really add some flavor to. Greg and I have been friends since we met. We were college roommates in the first year we were out at in the University of Windsor, and we've kept in touch ever since. So we've known each other since the early 90s, and a lot of common interests. And Greg's always been one of my friends that's like a real music guy. So when we reached out to him and asked him if he wanted to come on the show, he jumped at the chance. And when we asked him if he had any topics he'd be interested in, this is the topic he recommended. So Greg, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you guys for having me. It's a privilege to be on your show. I love you guys' podcast, and I appreciate you guys reaching out to me and let me share my heavy metal and hard rock knowledge with everybody, because it's something I love to do. So I'm looking forward to hearing your picks and sharing my picks and getting feedback from people on their picks and just having a good time.
This might surprise you. But back in the day, back in the 80s, I was a metalhead.
That surprises me.
It does surprise you?
Did you have long hair?
Yeah, I had pretty long hair, and I loved heavy metal music. And obviously, we're going to get into it today, but I was a real metalhead. But before we get into the heavy metal music, Derek, what's new in the world of pop culture for you in the last week? Anything?
Yeah, I got a couple quick things. So the first is I went and had a chance to rewatch a movie from the late 90s, and Greg's going to probably have a few things to say about this one, too. The movie was In and Out with Kevin Kline. Chris, have you seen In and Out?
I have not, but I'm familiar with it. That's the one where the guy comes out. It was based on the
he's
guy that won
outed
the
at
Oscar.
the Oscars.
Yeah.
So, it stars Kevin Kline, Matt Dillon, Joan Cusack, Tom Selleck, Debbie Reynolds, Wilford Brimley, Bob Newhart. I had a big cast. Greg and I were actually working together at Blockbuster Video when this came out, and I can remember it was very popular. Greg, you remember when this one came out? You were still at Blockbuster then, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I totally remember watching it. And now that you bring it up, I was like, man, you know what? That movie's kind of like a trailblazer for everything going on in today's day and age. They were ahead of their time.
Yeah.
If you made a remake of that in 2021, man, people would be all over it.
Well, yeah, and I found that, to your point exactly, there were some of what the movie presents was ahead of, maybe not ahead of its time, but certainly a trailblazer. But some of it, when you look back at it now, is even a little, maybe not as kosher by today's standards. But obviously, someone's got to, take those first steps. And I think this movie did a good job of handling what was a delicate topic at the time and using humor in a way to convey the message without actually doing what Revenge of the Nerds does and point and go, that guy's gay, laugh at him. It's, they've made this interesting story around it. And I thought it held up pretty well. I really liked it. I mean, Kevin Kline's great. I think he's underrated, and he was fantastic in this. And it had a lot of good quotes in it. And I had a good time going back to rewatch it. So
he married Phoebe Cates, didn't he?
She's the one with the red bikini.
The red bikini,
Fast Times, right?
From Fast Times. Yeah, he ended up marrying her.
I believe they're still married to this day.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nice. The other Two other ones. I had there was a mini series that just finished. It was in Canada here. We got it on Crave HBO, and in the US it was on Showtime. And it's called American Rust. It stars Jeff Daniels and Maura Tierney, who is from ER. A lot of people remember her from ER. And it's sort of this slice of life, look at Americana. This is what it says here on the Wikipedia. Compelling family drama that will explore the tattered American dreams through the eyes of complicated and compromised Chief of Police Del Harris, played by Daniels, in the Rust Belt town in Southwest Pennsylvania. And there's a murder that happens at the end of the first episode. It runs 9 episodes. It was very slow, very boring, very well acted, but oh my God, I was like, okay, there's got to be a payoff to this thing. I watched the 9th and final episode this week, and I yelled at the TV, "That's it? That's how this stupid thing ends? I want my 9 hours back." I was so ticked off. But Jeff Daniels is pretty good in this. Like he does a great job. And if he wasn't as good as he was in this, I would not have sat through it. But honestly, I can't recommend this to anyone. It is super duper slow. I believe it's based on a book. But wow, this is not something for everyone. And then finally, I have a documentary.
For 40 days and 40 nights, he watches documentaries. He likes to learn about the world. It's Derek's Documentaries. Derek's Documentaries.
Greg, I like to sing around here sometimes.
Oh, hey, no. Hey, you know what? When that song comes on and I'm in my car, I actually kind of sing along with it too. So
it's not
my guest.
It's not heavy metal. I apologize, but but what documentary do you have for us there, Derek?
So I mentioned a couple of weeks ago, there's a documentary series on Netflix called Bad Sport, and it's all about like cheating and gambling and people that abuse their position in the various sports for financial gain and criminality. And the first episode I watched was about college basketball, and they were doing point shaving. And then there's 6 episodes in total. The other 5 episodes all feature, we'll call them fringe sports, from the sense that most people in a North American audience are probably not as familiar. There's one about race cars. There's one about horse racing. And then the one I watched this week was on cricket, which, you know, I think a lot of people in North America have no idea what cricket is, myself included. And this one was, it was really good. It was about a professional cricket player. I think I got his name spelled right here. It's Hansi Cronje. I think that's how they pronounce it, from South Africa. And basically, he was a cricket superstar, but during apartheid in South Africa, they weren't allowed to compete in international sports. So it was not something he would ever have been able to make a career at, except that when he basically became old enough to become professional, that's when they allowed South Africa back onto the world stage. So it was sort of right place, right time, right guy with the right set of skills. And there was, they talk about how in one of his first big international matches, the actual cricket team captain was unexpectedly injured, and this rookie sensation basically had to step in to be the captain, and just made all the right decisions, and there was no turning back. And he became like this super duper rock star in the world of cricket, a national hero, you know, could do no wrong. He ended up making millions through endorsements. The team went on to win all these international competition, and it was, again, I didn't know anything about cricket, so it was all new to me. And then, of course, you know something's going to happen because it's on this Bad Sport documentary series. And sure enough, it comes out that eventually he starts throwing games and again, as the captain in cricket, apparently you have a lot of discretion about how certain things happen and who plays and who bats in what order and things like that. And so he would make adjustments in order for some very unscrupulous people to make a lot of money gambling. And it was this fall from grace story, and it was very good, very compelling. And I mean, I loved the fact that I just knew nothing about it other than it's called Bad Sport. So someone's doing something bad somewhere in here, but you know, you don't really know what happens until the end. And it was really good. So it's part of the Bad Sport series. It was the 6th and final episode. It's called Fallen Idol. These episodes run about an hour. I think this one was an hour and 10 minutes. I can't wait to watch the rest of these episodes. So that was my 3rd and final one for the week.
Cool. Greg, I don't want to put you on the spot or anything, but any chance you've been able to do anything interesting in regard to pop culture recently? Any movies or TV shows you watch, or anything to do with music, maybe, perhaps?
Yeah, I recently checked out Limp Bizkit, of the new metal late 90s fame. Put out their 6th album on Halloween. The album's called Still Sucks. That's Limp Bizkit style. But I like people rag on Limp Bizkit all the time. They're, everybody's punching bag, especially Fred Durst. But I got to be honest with you, I was one of the survivors, if you will, of Woodstock '99 when I was there. And never in all the live shows have I gone to has there been mosh pit, crowd surfing, crowd reaction that I've ever seen in Limp Bizkit set at Woodstock '99. If you were there, you will never forget it. It was as close to chaos and anarchy as you'll get. And I think you've seen enough documentaries. Derek, obviously, who watches documentaries, they will tell you, like, it was pandemonium for 70 minutes from beginning to end. They literally were the band that everybody wanted to see there. So I of course, like everybody else in the late 90s, loved Limp Bizkit, but over time lost touch just because they sort of faded into the background. This is their sixth album that they put out. And the last album they put out, an album before that, was 2011, this album called Gold Cobra, which wasn't bad, but, it just, didn't get a great reception. And the first single that came off this album was called Dad Vibes. And, it had a Limp Bizkit feel, but it was just missing a certain punch to it that Limp Bizkit usually brought. Like, I guess they're missing the heavy. It was good, but it wasn't great. But, again, I have a Spotify account, and I pay for it every month, so when Still Sucks came out on Halloween, I'm like, all right, I'll give it a chance. I'll download it, listen to it. And I got to say, it was okay. Out of 5 stars, I got to give it 3. It has some good songs on it, but it didn't stand the test of time. Like, what worked in 1999 is not going to work in 2021. This album, to me, almost felt like when the Beastie Boys back in the day put out Paul's Boutique, and they went and said, okay, well, we're not going to do our heavier sound that we had on License to Ill. We're going to kind of get funky disco-er with Paul's Boutique sound. And people were like, this is not the Beastie Boys that I know. But then, like, 5 years later, everybody went back and loved Paul's Boutique as an album. But this one will not have a Paul's Boutique feel to it. I think it's just kind of it's just going to come and go. I just don't see it really being anything other than, Limp Bizkit putting their name out there to try and get back into the spotlight and maybe go on tour when everything calms down. But they've been trying to put this album out since 2012. And a lot of critics jokingly called it the Chinese democracy of Limp Bizkit.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, so it's worth a listen if you like Limp Bizkit. I say give it a try and see what you like. I highly recommend the song Out of Style. If you like late 90s, early Limp Bizkit, that is the one song on there that's going to stick out to you and be like, that's the Limp Bizkit that I know. The other stuff, go in with an open mind and see if you like it.
Okay, guys, I got something for you. Now, Derek, I know you're not much of a wrestling fan, but Greg, how about you? No. You ever watch wrestling when you were younger?
Oh my God, I was obsessed in the 80s with the WWF.
Oh God, okay, you're going to love this. Because you've heard of Ted DiBiase, the $1 Million Man.
Oh, the $1 Million Man.
You remember him. Remember, he used to have a bodyguard named Virgil.
Yeah.
I mean, you remember him too, right?
Yep.
Before he was the $1 Million Man's bodyguard, he was a jobber named Lucius Brown. But anyway, best known as Virgil in WWF. So anyway, he was appearing at this Comic-Con that I went to on the weekend with my 12-year-old son. So we get there. Oh, and Derek, you had given us a list of some of the Batman comics that you needed to fill out your collection. So my son and I get to the Comic-Con and we go right to the comic vendors section and we start, searching. We start looking through the boxes, right? We're looking for all the Batman comics for Derek. And we're looking through it and this guy walks up to us and he's eating a slice of pizza and he just starts talking to me, like just out of the blue. And I look up and it's Virgil. And he just looks at me and he looks at me and my son and he goes, I don't like pepperoni pizza. And I'm like, okay, why not? Gives me the I'm like, oh, okay. He's like, I eat the pepperoni. I start to as soon as I eat it, goes in my stomach. Stomach starts rumbling. Got it. Pepperoni pizza gives me the and I'm like, all right. Thanks for sharing this with me and my young son. So what was it like working with Vince McMahon? And he's like, it sucks. He was an he's like, if Vince McMahon doesn't like you, he makes sure that you never work again. That's what he did to me. Did I mention pepperoni gives me the And I'm like, yes, you were kind enough to share that with us. Yes, thank you. So I think maybe Virgil took a few too many blows to the noggin back in his wrestling days, because, man, that is one weird dude. So that was my experience this week. Okay, I got this.
Did you happen to see how much he was charging for autographs?
He was, I believe, I've seen a thing on the internet where they called it Lonely Virgil, and where he just sits there at the table by himself. That's pretty much what was going on.
Yeah, he apparently charges like Undertaker type money for autographs. That he's Virgil.
Yeah, so yeah, he's Virgil, and you know what? I do believe that he will accept it in cheese pizza, because I mean that doesn't give him the so there's always that. So anyway, here we go.
Here's your dad joke of the week.
Gentlemen, in honor of Virgil, this week I'd like to do a pizza dad joke for you, okay? What is the difference between a good pizza joke and a bad pizza joke?
I have no idea.
The delivery.
Wow.
Don't like that one?
No. You know how they say there's no such thing as bad pizza? Mm-hmm. There's such a thing as a bad pizza joke.
Mm-hmm. There is such a thing as bad pizza. It's the kind that gives Virgil the
All I wanted for Christmas was a new intro.
Get in the studio and record.
All right. Okay. The gauntlet has been thrown down.
Just last week, I reamed out Roger Moore. He was totally satisfied.
I have no idea who that is.
Penis reduction surgery.
The absolute best documentary I saw all year was
Carol Baskin. Carol Baskin.
He sounds like a nice guy, right?
I kind of walked into that one, didn't I?
All right, gentlemen. So heavy metal was a real thing back in the 80s. And it got started back in the late 60s. I think a lot of people tend to point to bands like Zeppelin, Black Sabbath, Deep Purple as, you know, the quote-unquote pioneers of heavy metal. For me, I always felt Jimi Hendrix with Are You Experienced was one of the, you know, the first examples of metal that I always think of. I mean, God, he was amazing. But it was really bands in the 70s like Aerosmith, Alice Cooper, Kiss, especially Van Halen, I think really kind of put metal into the mainstream. But then in the 80s, things just took off. And there was this burst of heavy metal bands. I think it's safe to say that, you know, the 80s is when heavy metal just flourished. But I have a question before we get into our heavy metal albums from the 80s. Does heavy metal even exist anymore? Now, you know, I don't really pay attention to any pop culture after 1989. Now, Greg, you mentioned Limp Bizkit has a new album out, so heavy metal, it's still around?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's just more underground than it's not really arena based. It's a lot more you know, clubs and theaters, smaller audiences. But there's still every year they do weekends full of festivals with all metal bands, big and small. When they put on a festival in Montreal every summer called Heavy Montreal, it's 2 days back to back, full days of metal bands, and the place is packed. It's just that heavy metal is kind of taking a back seat back into the underground. Mm-hmm. And as you were mentioning, all the genres that you have now, it's hard now to find heavy metal that just appeals to 15 or 18,000 people a night. There's like a handful of bands that can do that. So because of the different genres of heavy metal that exist now, you get smaller crowds. But for me, I prefer it. I actually enjoy going to smaller venues to see my heavy metal shows than going into big venues. Right. But heavy metal is still very popular. You got 2 or 3 channels on the XM radio that play metal all the time.
And they play probably a lot of the older stuff too, I would imagine.
Yeah, well, Ozzy's Boneyard on the XM plays like mostly all the older stuff, but there's a channel called Liquid Metal, and they play all the newer bands and what have you. I actually prefer going to these metal festivals and getting there right at the beginning of the day and checking out the second stage where all the smaller bands are, because the guy on the main stage, you know, he's made it. He knows you're there to see him. So the guy on the second stage, he's not used to getting these size of a crowd. So when he comes out, he's giving you 110% and leaving it all out on the stage because he knows he's got this opportunity that he's not going to get again. And you get to see these bands that are just incredible. And then like 3 years later, you're going to see them on the main stage. So my recommendation is anytime you go to a heavy metal festival, always go to the second stage, because the second stage is where it's at with finding new bands. Always check out the second stage, because you're going to find great talent there all the time.
Some great advice for people like metal, and for people that like metal. Like I said before, we know that the 80s was like this sort of, massive time for metal. So we want to go back and we want to run down our top 5 list of our 5 favorite heavy metal albums from the 80s. Greg, you want to kick it off? What do you got for number 5? Take it away.
Well, I didn't really go with my 5 favorite. I went with, because as I was mentioning in our conversations before the show, by Saturday, I was still at 75 albums. Like, I could not narrow it down to 5. So I went a route where I said, I'm going to take 5 albums that I feel played an influence on the landscape of metal in the 80s, or may have been something that people overlooked as an album. They didn't see it in the same way that, you might now. So to start things off, I'm going to go with 1982 with the band Kiss and their album Creatures of the Night.
Wow.
Now, I know it's a little off, from being a monster album. Mm-hmm. But for me, Kiss has always been a big favorite of mine, because they're the ones who got me into heavy metal. Well, more Gene Simmons did, because when I was 5, I was in the store and I saw that solo album with Gene Simmons on the cover, where they released the 4 solo Kiss albums.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I saw Gene's album cover and I thought he looked so cool and so amazing. I picked it up, brought it to my mom. I'm like, you got to buy this for me. And she's like, what is it? I'm like, I don't know, but I got to have it. And I went home, put it on the record player, fell in love with not only Kiss, but then metal in general. So I'm a big Kiss guy, but Creatures of the Night was a big album because a few years before that, Kiss came out with I Was Made for Loving You. And
the disco kind of version.
The disco song. And Kiss fans back then hated it.
Yep.
Because they said they'll never make a disco album, they'll never make a disco song, and they went ahead and made a disco song. So Kiss fans weren't very happy about it. And then the next album that came out was called The Elder. And it was a concept album, and it just did not work. It was really dull, really boring, and all the reviews were coming out. Is Kiss's time done? Is the Kiss fascination over? Have people, had enough of Kiss? And so Peter Criss had left the band, and when they put out Creatures of the Night, by the time the album was released, Ace Frehley was out of the band. So Vinnie Vincent was now on guitar for Kiss at that point, even though he's not on the cover, but he did play on. And that album came out, and it was so much heavier than anything that they had put out before. Like, they had come out and they said, you know what, we're going to go with our mantra. If you wanted the best, you got the best. And it came out and it was heavy. And my favorite Kiss song of all time is on there, which is War Machine. And here's an interesting fact. War Machine was written by Canadian singer-songwriter Bryan Adams of Summer '69. Yep, he wrote it. And Gene Simmons actually said that when they were making this album and Bryan Adams was at the studio helping them make War Machine, he kept interrupting Gene trying to have relations with women, and it really annoyed him. So it was not exactly Bryan Adams' finest moment, but I was amazed to find out my favorite Kiss song was written by Bryan Adams. And they had that video, I Love It Loud, where it's they got that big tank on the stage, and it's shooting off explosions, and there's lights and everything, and it gave people the chance to see what Kiss is really like live and what they can do. And it's sort of as I mentioned before about Paul's Boutique with the Beastie Boys, this was a great comeback album for Kiss. This made people realize, hey, you know what, Kiss isn't gone. Kiss is still here. Kiss is still heavy. Kiss is still good. I was going to go with Lick It Up as my choice, because that was the first album they played without the makeup on.
Yep.
But then I was like, you know what? It was an album, but just because they didn't have makeup on, it wasn't that great an album. But Creatures of the Night, I thought was a great album to put Kiss back up on the map.
All right. I like it. Over to your number 5, Derek. What do you got?
I feel woefully underprepared after hearing how much homework Greg did for his pick.
I just like that you mentioned Lick It Up, I guess. I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. So no, that's a good tune.
Unmasked.
So, Chris, I just want to back up for a minute. One of the things you had said. So, in my mind, when I think of heavy metal, I always think of rock and roll from the 70s. I think of Black Sabbath. I think of Judas Priest. I think of some of the the bands we talked about before, Deep Purple, and to me they always sort of fell into that classic rock genre. But a lot of it is definitely in my mind is what when someone says, what's a heavy metal to you? That to me is always more what I feel heavy metal is. So when we got this topic, it was like, yeah, there's a lot of rock from the 80s, but I'm like, I don't know how much of this I would call heavy, quote unquote heavy metal. So it's like my picks are going to skew a little more towards the mainstream of rock, and there's definitely going to be a lot of argument about, I don't know if what you've picked is metal, but I'm going to keep.
We'll let Greg be the judge of this. This should be fun.
Yeah. So, okay, so my number
please
5
tell me he's not going to go with Starship. We built this city or something like that. He's in trouble. Okay, go ahead. You're number 5.
Okay, so my number 5 pick. I've talked about this album before. I've talked about the songs on this album before. I've talked about the band before. I'm going with Def Leppard, Hysteria. Is it heavy metal, quote unquote? Maybe. I mean, definitely earlier Def Leppard, I would feel in my mind is more sort of the heavy metal. Like their first 2 albums were definitely more of that raw feel, which I always associate that sort of raw sound with being the heavy part of heavy metal. But this was definitely a rock. You could call it glam metal or hair metal. And this album was huge. Like it had. It released 7 singles. It came out in 1987. It sold over 20 million copies. It was produced by Mutt Lange, who has a phenomenal reputation, and like it had a huge list of singles. Pour Some Sugar on Me, Women, Animal, Rocket, Armageddon It, Love Bites. The first number 1 from Def Leppard. Like this album, although Love Bites is a hair ballad, a love ballad, but when it's heavy and it's rocking, it's there. So I felt that this being one of my all-time personal favorites, I had to include this on the list. That's why I'm putting it in at number 5 is Def Leppard, Hysteria.
No, I think that's a good one. All right, guys, I got one for you. You remember Tawny Kitaen? She became famous for laying across Whitesnake's car in the Here I Go Again video in 87. But that wasn't her first foray into heavy metal. Oh, no. She first appeared on the cover of one of the most recognizable heavy metal album covers of all time. And that's Out of the Cellar by Rat. And I think everyone always thinks of this album, they think of the 2 big songs, Wanted Man and Round and Round. But I also like some of the other songs on here. Lack of Communication. Remember that one, Greg? Lack of Communication, Back Off. And the video for Back for More with Tawny Kitaen, she used to go out with the guitarist, Robin Crosby. And for some reason, in the video for that song, he's playing an acoustic guitar on stage, even though it's like this super thrashy song. So it's just weird. But Round and Round is the song that makes this album so good.
It's a great song. I love that song.
God, it is one of the best heavy metal songs of the 80s. Rat is definitely a glam metal band. They had their own unique sound for sure. And they didn't just play 3 chords. It was all a little bit more thrashy sounding, but still mainstream enough to bring in that wider audience. I mean, hell, the album went triple platinum in the States, and Rat was pretty good. And I really liked them when I was a teenager. I used to take a bus to school, and I would listen to cassette tapes on my Sony Walkman, and this is one of the tapes I used to listen to the most on the way to and home from school as a 9th grader. Rat, Out of the Cellar, baby. My number 5. Number 4, what do you got, Greg?
Since we were talking about Rat and we were talking about Def Leppard, I kind of went with the people I consider the pioneers of hair metal. And I went with 1983's Shout at the Devil by Motley Crue.
Yes. Nice.
Yeah, to me, that was the album that first made me realize how much I like heavy metal girls. Because the one thing about Motley Crue and Shout at the Devil era was that the reason I picked the album was that it broke the gender barrier in heavy metal, which was where the fans were predominantly males. It wasn't a very female-driven fan base. And Motley Crue came out, and all of a sudden there was a large fan base of girls now who liked this kind of music. And they were almost like the first boy band of heavy metal, because you had 4 different personalities in there, depending on what you wanted. Did you want Bad Boy Vince? Did you want quiet, brooding Nikki Sixx? Did you want fun, playful, immature Tommy Lee, or did you want the mysterious Nick Mark?
I'm pretty sure that's not what the girls were looking for when it came.
Yeah,
to
I know,
Lee.
but but there was that sense, they had those personalities going, but I never really considered Motley Crue to be a hair band until that Theater of Pain era. You listen to the stuff on Shout at the Devil, and it's edgier, and it's got heavier riffs than you would on any other hair metal record. And one of the reasons that I also think that it sticks out is because they do a cover of the Beatles' Helter Skelter on there.
Yes.
And I had no idea that the Beatles even did Helter Skelter. I only knew I Want to Hold Your Hand and She Loves You, Yeah, Yeah, Yeah. So to hear Helter Skelter and find out that the Beatles recorded something that had that kind of heavy sound to it was amazing. So it opened up a whole new world for me to find different styles of Beatles music other than just, the suit and the tie stuff that they did. And the Looks That Kill video is classic. I mean, they played that on Much Music, Power Hour, nonstop all the time. That's just a classic video. And I can't stress enough that the best thing you can do, the best book that you can read, and the best book that you can buy is The Dirt, which is the biography of Motley Crue. I bought that book. I think it's about 500, maybe 600 pages. And the first day I bought it, I started reading it at like 7 o'clock at night. And I stopped reading it when the sun came up. I could not put it down. It is just such a fantastic book. All music books should be made like The Dirt. So if you're a big fan of Motley Crue and you haven't read The Dirt, shame on you. Go out and get it. Greatest music book ever written.
Nice. And great album at number 4. Love your pick. Okay, Derek, what do you got for your number 4?
All right, so we limited ourselves to picks from the 1980s, and this one just squeaks in. It came out in October of 1989, so a lot of people don't realize that it is technically by the numbers from the 80s, but I'm going with Pretty Hate Machine by 9 Inch Nails. So this is definitely more of an industrial sound than a heavy metal sound, but I think it's a good example of how music changes and evolves. And so earlier I was saying, I think of heavy metal as more of that 70s classic rock sound, which I think a lot of people would agree with. But you don't get Pretty Hate Machine without that sort of classic rock sound coming 10 years earlier. And I think this is a really good example of how, you've gone through a decade of synthesizer pop, and here's Trent Reznor, who's now using these tools in a way to make a sound that's a heavier sound. It doesn't sound anything like Duran Duran and Depeche Mode, but he's using some of the exact same tools that they use to make a very different style of music to appeal to a very different audience and to give it a more heavy sound. This is one of my all-time favorite albums. I always, I used to, when I had the CD player in the car, I would just throw the CD on and I would just listen to it start to finish. I love every song on this one. As I mentioned, it came out in '89. It was on the Billboard 200 charts for 115 weeks. So that's more than 2 years. That's a long staying power. So it obviously was the kind of thing that was experimental at the time, and a lot of people dug it, or a lot of people started to come around on it, which is part of what kept it on the charts for so long. People know it. It had the biggest original single from 9 Inch Nails with Head Like a Hole, but they also had Down in It and Sin were a couple of singles off that one as well. But this is definitely one that when someone's like, what are your heaviest albums in your collection? This definitely fits that category for me. So I'm doing Pretty Hate Machine from 1989, 9 Inch Nails, my number 4 pick.
All right, my number 4. I'm aligned with Greg on this one. Shout at the Devil, Motley Crue. There's the title, the pentagram on the cover. This album, when it came out, was immediately targeted by Christian groups. It caused all this controversy. But the thing was, when it came out, I was a teenager. I didn't care about any of that stuff. I wasn't much of a rebel as a teenager. Like, I didn't just do things just to tick off my parents or anything like that. That wasn't me. One thing I did like about this album was the music. I had never heard a sound like this before. There's remember they do the intro called In the Beginning?
Yes.
But then the chords open up for the intro to Shout at the Devil. Like, just wow. They use like this drop D tuning, and like totally overdriven, like 3 chords that just make up the intro. Man, this song packs a punch. Like I never thought it was possible to have music hit you so hard in the gut like I was when I heard this. And when you hear the intro to that first song, like you feel it in your gut. It's not quite the whole pepperoni pizza that gives Virgil the kind of gut rumble, but I mean, but it packs a punch. You know what I mean? That's the way music should be evaluated at this point. Is it Virgil gets the it's kind of heavy metal music, or is it just regular? But anyway, this album, I tell you, like I say, it opens great, and it just keeps getting better. Like Looks That Kill, probably the best song on the album. And like Greg mentioned, that cover of Helter Skelter, which if you think about, I was talking before about, Jimi Hendrix and the roots of heavy metal. If you go back and listen to the original song by the Beatles, you could argue that song by the Beatles is the roots of heavy metal music right there. But, and the thing was like Motley Crue had already done a studio album before this one came out, but this one put them on the map. Like it was huge. Oh man, it was loud. It had all these overtones in it about the occult, but mostly the music is just a wall of sound. It's the heavy metal version of eating pepperoni pizza. Shout at the devil, my number 4. So number 3, Greg, what do you got?
Leaving them off the list would be a travesty. So I made sure to at least include one. I was going to include 2, but then I was like, that's too much. So 1984, Iron Maiden put out the album Power Slave. And they came over with all that new wave of British heavy metal that was taken over here in North America, which, as we discussed earlier, allowed for metal to explode when all these British bands came over, like Judas Priest and Motorhead. But Iron Maiden would already had success with Number of the Beast and Peace of Mind before Power Slave. But Power Slave was that defining album for Iron Maiden where they said, you know what? We're more than just like, a metal band. We got musical talent. We got musical abilities. We can write intellectual lyrics. We can make longer songs. Like they have that song Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner, which is like 15 minutes long, and you're not bored. Like you can listen to all 15 minutes of it and not be bored for a single second. But another thing that Power Slave did that set a trend in the metal world was, do you remember the cover art on Power Slave?
Yeah, I was going to say that, Greg. You can't talk about Iron Maiden and not mention the album art.
Yeah, the album art for Power Slave, where their mascot Eddie is dressed as the pharaoh on the pyramid, is just fantastic. And at that point, they set the bar for every other heavy metal band and said, "Hey, if you're putting out an album, you can't just put your face on it and you guys standing in front of a wall. That doesn't work anymore. You got to have something." And the tour that they did for Power Slave, where Twisted Sister was the opening band for it, and they were doing their Stay Hungry stuff, is considered legendary. Like when you talk to metal bands today, they all talk about how legendary that tour was for Power Slave. And if you're a big Iron Maiden fan and you're looking for something interesting to watch, there's a Canadian documentary guy named Sam Dunn, and he does all kinds of musical documentaries. It started with global metal, and he's branched out to do other things. Derek, he did one about Rush that I think you'd really like too. And he did a documentary called Flight 666, where he went around with Iron Maiden when they were doing their Somewhere Back in Time tour. And he basically used that documentary where he flew on Iron Maiden's private plane. They have their own jumbo jet. And they went all around the world, and it was just amazing to see that the reception that they get in every single country they go to is just absolute insanity. People sleep out for days just so they can get a good spot in front of the stage to see them. So again, I picked Iron Maiden's Power Slave. I just thought it was their best album in the 80s.
Nice. All right, Derek, what's your number 3?
All right. My number 3 pick, I think I would not be surprised if this band and maybe even this album is going to appear on at least one of our other lists, because you can't do a heavy metal list and not put AC/DC on there. So my number 3 pick is Back in Black by AC/DC from July 1980. So just squeaks in under the wire there on the other end, whereas the last one was in 89. This is 1980, 10 years earlier. So this is a huge album. I think a lot of people, they had a tremendous amount of commercial success, a tremendous amount of staying power. It had songs like You Shook Me All Night Long, obviously Back in Black, the title track, Hell's Bells. So these are big mainstream hits that certainly rock. And this was the first album to feature the new singer, Brian Johnson, after their previous singer, Bon Scott, had died. And so, again, there was a lot of expectation or mystery around, like, how's the new singer gonna do? Like, is it gonna be any good? Like, that's always the big thing with a band, right? The lead singer leaves, or in this case, the lead singer dies. Can the band still do what they did before as good or better with somebody new? And I think that, this was a pretty good introduction to say, yeah, the new guy can do it. And again, this leans very much on what, in my mind, a heavy metal needs to be. It's that, it's got to be loud. It's got to be that drums, the guitars, the heavy, the raw rock and roll sound. This is definitely built out of that 70s classic rock sound, which again is sort of, in my mind, what you need to be a strong heavy metal album. Sure, AC/DC has had some commercial success, and I know that some of the perception with heavy metal has always been, well, once you sell X number of albums, you're selling out. You don't know what it is to be metal anymore. You're selling out. And I'm sure they had that kind of criticism, but they still rock it. And then, I mean, there's the big joke is every AC/DC song sounds the same. And it's like, yeah, but they've been singing it for 35 years, and isn't it great? So I got to put Back in Black as my number 3 for my top 5 favorite heavy metal albums from the 80s.
Every AC/DC song sounds similar, but they don't sound the same because they all have a unique hook to them.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So they're so good. Okay, my number 3, Derek, you mentioned Hysteria by Def Leppard. And I'm going to go with Def Leppard as well. But one of the albums that really influenced me as a teenager, and as a musician, I guess, was Pyromania from Def Leppard. It came out in 83. And the band had been somewhat successful before that. They had a song called Bring It On the Heartbreak from High and Dry in 81, but they just exploded when Pyromania came out. And everyone obviously remembers songs like Photograph and Foolin'. But I will always equate being at the local arcade with hearing the song Rock of Ages. There was a jukebox at the arcade, and they didn't have very many metal songs in it, but a lot of the kids at the arcade, we liked metal music. So Rock of Ages just got played over and over and over and over again. And I was okay with that because, I mean, it's a great song. And I even really liked the opening track, Rock Till You Drop. The whole album's amazing, and they went on to I think, more commercial success with Hysteria, like you mentioned, Derek, with Pour Some Sugar on Me and stuff like that. But for me, it'll always be Pyromania that was the big influence for them. I love this album. And when I think back to that time in my life, I always think of this album. Like the cover is amazing. Greg mentioned, how important it is to have a great cover. And I thought that the art was very unique and was pretty cool. They kind of copied the same style when they did Hysteria. But I recently bought a black t-shirt with the Pyromania cover on it, and I get so many comments on it. I think people recognize this album for what it is. That it's one of the most iconic heavy metal albums of the 80s. So it's my number 3. All right, number 2, Greg, what do you got?
What I got? Well, a lot of the time, I think heavy metal is that one genre where every band has a live album. I don't know any other genre of music that has as many live albums as heavy metal has. Seems like everybody's got one. So I was going to go with Iron Maiden's Life After Death, but I already picked Power Slave. So I went with what many consider to be the quintessential live metal album. And that comes from the legendary Motorhead, No Sleep Till Hammersmith.
Wow.
Which, yeah, if you know Motorhead, like, they're a great band. There's no doubt about it. But the one thing about Motorhead is that it's the live experience that makes Motorhead what it is. They were faster, they were heavier, they were louder. Loudest show I've ever seen in my life, Slayer with Motorhead in 1988. I was deaf for like 3 days after. It was insane. But this album, because they were still young at the time, was able to capture that speed, that heaviness, that loudness, and it actually remained number 1 on the UK album charts. And if you can believe that, a Motorhead album was number 1 on the UK charts, which is crazy. And the funny thing is that in almost like a Spinal Tap kind of way, on that tour where they recorded all these songs to put the album together, not one date was at the Hammersmith. So I have no idea why it's called live, No Sleep Till Hammersmith, because they didn't play there. And they originally wanted it to be a double album, but they didn't have enough to record 4 sides. So it stayed just a single album. But the reason why this album took off was because the album that they were touring it for was, of course, the legendary Ace of Spades album. So it comes in at number 2 for me, and being the number 1 live metal album that if you got to buy one live metal album, No Sleep Till Hammersmith with Motorhead.
Very cool. All right, Derek, number 2 heavy metal album of the 80s.
All right. They say imitation is the most sincerest form of flattery. So my number 2 pick is Motley Crue, Shout at the Devil,
Nice.
which appeared on both of your picks.
Yes.
So I don't really think there's a whole lot more to say about this. I absolutely agree with Greg. The Dirt biography book was fantastic. They did a Netflix movie version of it, which was just okay. It was a little bit tame, but again, it was nice to revisit that source material when the movie came out on Netflix. One of the things that I always remember was when I got that album, again, my parents were like, oh, well, we're hearing in the media, we shouldn't be letting you listen to it. And I remember one of my buddies who was really into like rock and roll and heavy metal more than I was. He's like, if your parents tell them that, just say, Mom, it's called Shout at the Devil, not Shout with the Devil, and let them stew on that for a while. And so, yeah, I remember having that discussion with my parents. They're like, we don't know if we should let you listen to this. We're hearing it's bad. And it's like, Mom, it's Shout at the Devil, not with the devil. Oh, that's a good point. Okay, go ahead. So, but no, for all the reasons we've already mentioned. And I'm glad both of you touched on the Helter Skelter. Again, that was the first time I had ever heard that song. I had no idea it was a cover until many years later. So that was my introduction to that. Again, Greg talked about the music video, which was in heavy rotation. You know me, I'm a big music video guy. I loved it. And yeah, it was just one of these albums where it was like, you'll put I had the cassette. So it's like you press play, you get that in the beginning intro where you're like, okay, where's this going? And then, yeah, bam, it gets right into the next song. And you're like, oh my God, these guys really, they got something to say. And so my number 2 pick, Motley Crue, Shout at the Devil.
Nice.
Can I just say though that you were talking about Netflix and the movie? Am I the only one that's like, Netflix lives off series, like 8 episode series, and you can binge watch them?
Yep.
I don't understand why Netflix didn't make the Dirt an 8-part series, man.
Yeah.
I don't know why they just condensed it into a movie. I mean, there was so much more to tell, and there was so much more they could have done. And I was so disappointed that they turned it into just one movie when I felt you could have made an 8-episode series. That's how good that book is. That's how amazing those stories are. And I was just disappointed that they didn't make it a series and just turned it into a movie.
Yeah,
Was it like a scripted type of thing? It wasn't a documentary, right?
Yeah, no, it was scripted. It had Machine Gun Kelly playing Tommy Lee, which I thought was weird.
Okay, my number 2. I'm going with Blizzard of Oz from Ozzy Osbourne in 1981.
Nice.
Back when I was in grade 8, some of the quote unquote bad kids, they were listening to this music. And so I was kind of curious. I was interested, like what this is all about. And I think they listened to Ozzy mostly because they wanted to be seen as being bad. And, it had all this satanic imagery in it, and he would bite the heads off bats and all that stuff. So Ozzy appealed to those kids. But for me, I didn't care about any of that stuff. For me, the music was where it was always at. And the music on this album is unbelievable. Randy Rhoads' guitar playing is simply some of the best guitar ever to appear on a metal album. Like, he was just so slick in his playing. And then the songs, like, most people just kind of gravitate right to Crazy Train, and for good reason. I mean, it's a great song. But for me, like, where do you start on this? Like, there's I Don't Know, and then Crazy Train, like I mentioned, there's Goodbye to Romance, and D, and Suicide Solution, and Mr. Crowley, and No Bone Movies, Revelation, and Steal Away the Night. Every single song on this album is fantastic. I had 2 of these old iPods kicking around, so I stuck some songs on them, and I gave them to my 2 boys. And one of the songs that I put on them was I Don't Know from this. And so now both my kids love this song. It's so good. Ozzy had this unique voice, and his music just jumps out at you, you know? And not only did he have a unique voice, but he had a real unique sound to his music. I think a lot of it was Randy Rhoads' guitar playing and his songwriting too. But this album, like I say, it's amazing. I still think it's Ozzy's best work of his musical career. And I mean, if you think about it, to leave an iconic band like Black Sabbath, you know, after he gave the world Iron Man and Paranoid, and then going on to do even better work on your own. And the thing was, it was popular with the mainstream. The album went 5 times platinum. Blizzard of Oz. It's just amazing. I can't say enough. So, all right, we're down to the nitty gritty now. Number 1, heavy metal album of the 80s. Greg, what do you got?
Just to go back to Ozzy with Randy Rhoads, that Ozzy Randy Rhoads tribute live album's awesome too. I love that album.
Yes,
yeah, that's so good.
The one where
captured...
Randy Rhoads is like up on his shoulders and playing his guitar on the cover.
Yep, that to me is a fantastic live album. All that stuff that you were just talking about on the Blizzard of Oz comes out fantastic on that live album. I can't get enough of it. So okay. Anyways, coming back to it. Number 1 album is not only the number 1 heavy metal album of the 80s. It's not only the number 1 heavy metal album of all time. It's the number 1 album of all time, in my opinion, without a doubt. You can't touch it. It's perfection. It's Metallica's Master of Puppets. It is their 3rd album, and it is recorded in Denmark with Flemming Rasmussen. I think I'm pronouncing his name right there. And it really changed the landscape of heavy metal, because at that point, people sort of shifted over to, I don't want my bands anymore with hairspray and makeup and tight clothes. I want guys coming out here with messy, greasy hair and jeans and T-shirt and just playing hard. And it opened up a genre of metal called thrash metal, which opened up a whole new world of bands coming out of the San Francisco Bay Area scene, like Exodus and Testament. Even though Slayer wasn't from San Francisco, they got looped into that. And it was so incredible that when they first started opening from Master of Puppets, they were the opening act for Ozzy at the time. And Ozzy was going to these arenas and they're sold out everywhere he went. But by the time Ozzy got on stage, more than 3/4 of the venue had already left because everybody went there to see Metallica. That's how impressive it was. And they were just starting to steamroll and starting to take off. And they went over to Europe in September of '86. And they were touring with Anthrax at the time, who was doing There Among the Living, which is a fantastic album, by the way. And they unfortunately had a bus accident. And when the bus flipped over, their bassist Cliff Burton died. And a lot of people thought that that would be the end of Metallica. But they went out and quickly found another bassist, and a lot of people thought that it was maybe too soon, and it turned out it was too soon, because if you see that documentary that they did, Some Kind of Monster, where James goes into rehab and the band's basically on the verge of breaking up, they basically come to admit that they really treated their new bassist, Jason Newsted, so poorly. They didn't even allow him to have bass on the next album, which was And Justice for All. They turned the bass down on him, so you can't even hear his bass on the next album. But Master of Puppets is that one album where from beginning to end, it's all killer, no filler. Every song is a hit. And the word, like the weakest song on the album, you put that on anybody else's album, and it's a huge hit. That's how good it was. And in 2015, it was the first metal album selected by the Library of Congress in the U.S. for preservation in the National Recording Registry for being culturally, historically, and aesthetically significant. Like, you can't get more perfect than Metallica's Master of Puppets. It's just their best stuff. It basically announced to the world, we're here and we're taking metal by the reins and we're changing it, and you guys are going to like it no matter what. And I can't recommend it enough. Fantastic album.
I don't think you could have had the whole 90s grunge scene without Metallica.
Nope. Yeah, absolutely not. I agree.
That influential. So, Oh, great pick. All right, Derek, what have you got for your number one heavy metal album from the 1980s?
Well, I mean, Greg's a hard act to follow there. So, I mean, I feel that no matter what I say now, it's going to be a letdown. So thanks, bud. I'm Aussie to your Metallica, apparently. Hopefully 3/4 of our audience hasn't turned off the recording. So my number one pick, again, you know my taste. They're pretty mainstream. This one is also a fairly mainstream rock/metal album. I'm going with Appetite for Destruction by Guns N' Roses, released in 1987. When we did our top favorite rock songs of the 80s, I had Welcome to the Jungle as my number one. I think this album is definitely, if not it is my personal number one choice for my favorite rock album, favorite heavy metal album of the 80s. I think it's a solid pick. Again, lots of great songs on this that really emphasize that whole rock and roll sound. It's Welcome to the Jungle, which I just mentioned, Sweet Child of Mine, Paradise City, Night Train, Mr. Brownstone. Like, this thing had all these songs that were released that were hits. People just latched onto it. It was that combination. It's like Greg was saying with when Metallica came out, it's like, they sort of opened the doors. Well, this one came out a year later, and now that people were willing to open their minds a little bit and say, okay, well, what else you got? Maybe Metallica's a little too heavy for me. What else you got? And I think Guns N' Roses was sort of that good middle ground where it's like, yeah, they're still rock and roll, and you could definitely say that they're still heavy metal, but they were still close enough to the mainstream that they were able to get that mainstream radio play. They were able to get the videos through MTV and Much Music. And I mean, I think that this is their debut album, which for a band to have this strong an outing as their first time out of the gate is phenomenal in and of itself. But yeah, it holds up. It stands the test of time. These are classic songs. This is a great album. This is my number one pick.
I think it's a great pick. And, you could argue that they kind of peaked, with their debut album. But, it's so good. And you mentioned, Sweet Child of Mine. When you, up until then, heavy metal was like 3 chords and kind of thrashy. And then they come in with this crazy intro that's just so great and so different. Oh, no, that was a good pick. All right, my number one, not only the greatest heavy metal album of the 80s, it's the greatest comeback album of all time. Derek, you mentioned this one already, but I'm elevating it all the way to number one. That's Back in Black by AC/DC.
Nice.
The thing is, the band had already established themselves as this, huge international success. And they were pumping out song after song. And there were some great songs. They had like Highway to Hell and TNT and It's a Long Way to the Top if you want to rock and roll. And then in 1980, like you mentioned, Bon Scott, their lead singer, died. And this would have killed most bands. But they not only did they not disband, they went out and got Brian Johnson and they came out with their best album ever. Like, every single song on this album is amazing. Like, you were talking about Hell's Bells, there's Shoot to Thrill, What Do You Do for Money, Honey? Like, Giving the Dog a Bone, Have a Drink on Me, Shake a Leg, You Shook Me All Night Long, Back in Black, Rock and Roll Ain't Noise Pollution. Amazing. And the thing was, when it came out, the album only went to number 4 in the US. It hit number 1 both in Canada and the UK. But it has since gone on to sell, not 3 times platinum like Rat, or even 5 times platinum like Motley Crue. Oh no. Back in Black, 25 times platinum in the US alone. Like, it's huge. It's an amazing album. I think it's AC/DC's best album. It's the best heavy metal album of the 80s, in my opinion. You could argue it's the best heavy metal album of all time. You could even make the case that it's one of the best albums, period, of all time. Like I said, a lesser band would have just faded away after the lead singer died, but AC/DC instead came out with their best work ever. So it's my number one. So great list, guys.
Nice. Good pick.
Yeah, very impressive list. I liked Derek's 9 Inch Nails Pretty Hate Machine that was a out of the box type pick. I enjoyed that. I thought that was an interesting pick. I just wanted to.
Well, especially considering you liked a lot of mainstream stuff, and you were even saying you liked kind of more mainstream, but that one was off the beaten path for sure.
Well, it couldn't all be hair metal and glam metal, right? It had to have a little edge to it.
Yeah. Well, one of the best comments I was talking to my friend about this when we were going over the list, and he was surprised when I was going to pick a hair band, and I picked Motley Crue, Shout at the Devil. He's like, oh, I figured you were going to. But he's like, I'm surprised you're mentioning a hair metal band. And I said, well, we're talking about all the different genres of metal, so you got to figure hair metal is like marijuana, and Slayer is like heroin, technically they're both drugs. You know, one's heavier than the other, but you still got to classify them as drugs. And so that's why I said to him, I got to choose a hair metal band because it is a genre of heavy metal. It's not really my favorite genre, but, you know, again, we got to include everything. And that's, again, why I liked some of these picks. I thought they were great. I thought we picked a whole bunch of different genres in there. But that 9 Inch Nails, I thought was a good pick.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, bud.
All right. Yep. Well, now it is time to
Fun with Caveman.
Greg, since you're our esteemed guest this week, and we like to be kind to our guests, and by kind, I mean like throw them to the wolves, you know, kind of thing. So we're going to put you in the hot seat, and we're going to play some trivia. So here's how it works. So, since you're a big heavy metal fan, obviously, stuff from the 80s especially. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give you the title of a song. All right? All you have to do is name the album that it's on. All right?
Okay.
Pretty straightforward, right? You can do this. All right?
I'm going to totally bomb, but yeah.
Nah. In worst case scenario, I'll bail you out and I'll help you out with the.
I was going to say, I'll be your phone a friend if you don't have it. Not that I'll know it if you don't, but.
All right, fair enough.
If I have to, you know, I can bail you out. All right, okay. So we'll start you with some easy ones. Okay, Flying High Again. What album is Flying High Again on?
That's Ozzy, Blizzard of Oz.
I'm sorry. It's on Diary of a Madman. It's on his next album after that. Yeah. All right. Here's super easy mainstream one for you. I Wanna Rock. What album is I Wanna Rock?
Oh, I know.
I'll let Derek take this one.
I know it was Twisted Sister, and it was
D. Snyder holding the bone in his hand.
Yeah. Sorry, it was. Oh my God, I'm blanking on. I had it, and as soon as Greg said "take it away," I was like, "Uh-oh." I forget. Greg, save me.
Stay Hungry.
Stay Hungry. That's it.
Got it. All right. Talk Dirty to Me. It's by Poison. I'll give you a hint.
I know it. Look what the cat dragged in.
Very good. All right. Bad Boys Running Wild by the Scorpions. 1984.
Is that on Rock You Like a Hurricane?
Oh, I'm sorry. The album is called Love at First Sting.
Oh, Love at First Sting. I'll be honest with you. Growing up, my friends used to be like, "Are you going to the Scorpions concert with us?" I was like, "Yeah, no."
I like the Scorpions. They're pretty good. All right. Slick Black Cadillac.
Oh, my friend Christian's going to love this one. That's Quiet Riot, Mental Health.
Metal Health, but I'll give it to you. Okay. All right. Knocking at Your Back Door. What album is Knocking at Your Back Door on? If you need a hint, do you know the band?
No, I know the band. That's Deep Purple.
Mm-hmm.
And it was on the album. It was on the name. It was Perfect Strangers.
Very good. From 1984. Okay. Kickstart My Heart.
Too easy. That's Motley Crue, Dr. Feelgood.
Ooh, now we're going to get a couple of tougher ones for you. Rainbow in the Dark. Rainbow in the Dark. By Dio.
Like a rainbow in the dark.
Yes.
I know that song.
Yeah. You can picture the album cover from 1983.
Is it who sings it?
Dio.
Oh man, it's not on. Is it on Holy Diver?
Sure is. It's on Holy Diver. Good for you. All right, You've Got Another Thing Coming.
Yeah, that's on another album we should have mentioned in the 80s here. Judas Priest, Screaming for Vengeance.
Very, very good. Cult of Personality.
Oh, yeah. I was just actually talking to somebody about going to see Living Colour and Bad Brains back in the day. That's Living Colour off the album Vivid.
That's a good song. I love that song.
The last one. Pepperoni Pizza Gives Me the
That is off Ted DiBiase's album Everybody's Got a Price.
I'm sorry, that was actually the bonus track on the wrestling album from 1985. Remember the one that had Land of a Thousand Dances on it? So good job.
Not only did I have that album, I had the sequel, The Pile Driver, with Coco there in the construction helmet. I had that album too.
I remember that too. Yes, I forgot about that one. Good for you. All right, big thanks to Greg Martin for joining us this week. Heavy metal albums from the 80s definitely is your thing. I tell you what, will you come back and join us again sometime here on the podcast?
Oh, absolutely, man. Anytime. I absolutely enjoyed being on the show today. I enjoyed doing the research for the show today. Like I say, if you want to talk anything music, I got hundreds of books. I've seen hundreds of documentaries. I've gone to hundreds of concerts. You name it, music. It's my wheelhouse. Anytime, give me a call.
You want to take over for Derek? He's pretty much sick to death of my dad jokes and my songs at this point, I got to figure, so. Okay, so next week, it's time for, once again, for a pop culture fantasy draft. So last time out, it was 1981, and we did that back on episode 193. So next week, we're going to be holding another draft. And just to go over it once again, Derek and I will each draft a pop culture team from a year, and the team has to be comprised of 3 movies, 3 songs, 3 TV shows, and a personal pick. And this time, it's back to me to suggest a year. And you know, I really loved doing the draft for 1984. That was a hell of a year for pop culture. So I want to stay kind of close to that. So I think, Derek, what I'd like to do is come back next week and draft a pop culture team from the year 1985.
Ooh.
Okay. So we're gonna
throw down the gauntlet, buddy. This is my. Remember, you said previously the year when you were 11 is your year. This is the year I was 11. This is my year.
This will be your year. Oh, you're gonna beat me on this one.
I plan to.
Well, it should be good. So make sure and join us next week. We're going to be doing our pop culture fantasy draft for 1985. Big thanks once again for Greg Martin for coming out. Until next time, this is Chris McBrien on behalf of Derek Myers saying thanks for listening to Pop Goes Your World, the pop culture podcast for the generations.
Thanks for listening to Pop Goes Your World. You can contact Chris and Derek at popgoesyourworld.com. Please take a minute and review the podcast on iTunes or wherever you download and listen to the show.